Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 Houston Open Initial Research Show. As you can see, the fandom is still on full display as we march on to the Sweet 16. And we march on Calls to ever closer to the Masters. This week, as we alluded to, we are in Houston for the Houston Open, a course and tournament that has a long prestige on the PGA Tour. Hopefully your Valspar went very, very well. I had a decent Valspar. Did not play any Victor Hovland. So hopefully you had the Victor Hovland outright. Played a lot of Victor Hovland. Played the Justin Thomas. I had a pretty good sweat going at the beginning of the day. Corey Connors fell off on the front nine, so that ended that. But DFS was fairly successful. Most of the plays, minus like Christian Bezadenhout and Adam Schenk. Whoever recommended Adam Schenk, oh boy. Not going to say that was me, but it was clearly me. Most of the plays worked out pretty well, so hopefully you followed on all of the good plays, avoided all of the bad plays, and we turn our attention to Houston. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where normally I post research regarding the tournament of that week, some course information, patterns of previous winners. I'll try to have something for Houston tomorrow. Can't guarantee that I will because it's still a fairly new course. And some extenuating circumstances that it has only been played one time before, as in last year, in its current spot on the schedule. So I'll see what I can come up with no guarantee. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contest I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you follow me over there, you would have seen the very, very light betting card for the Valspar, considering I was knee-deep in March Madness as well. The Corey Connors outright, the Nikolai Højgaard, who didn't play very well. And then you would have seen the Christian Bezadenhout. You would have seen the Joe Highsmith, who played well, populating a lot of my lineups, the Corey Connors, etc. So if you want to see those pieces of information week in and week out, give me a follow over at X. And lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I really can't recommend it enough. Worked with Gabe for quite a while now. Really enjoyed it, as evidenced by our 2025 Picks Challenge. And I think, don't quote me on that as he'll update us later in the week, but I think I might have taken the lead on Gabe for the first time this year. So we're going to try to keep the momentum going in that regard as well. But you really are missing out if you aren't subscribed to his article. It is free to subscribe to his articles, so make sure you're doing that and go show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, we're live. Chat's open. Want to hear from you. How are your brackets doing in terms of March Madness? Is your champion still alive? Do you have your Final Four still intact? I want to hear about that. And then I want to hear how your Valspar went. And then turning our attention to the Houston Open. Who do you think is your favorite early on this week? What kind of players are you focused on? How much do you know of the course? Would love to hear from you all. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2025 Houston Open. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening with the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. So long as I can get all of my stuff set up here. Hey, Phil, I see you in chat there. Let me get kind of set up here, and I'll get to you here in a moment. Would have made an extra 100 if JT won. Lost money though. Well, sometimes it simply comes down to that. I'm assuming you had the JT outright then. I hate to hear that it was a losing week for you. Overall, it was a losing week for me as well. But it was pretty close to break even. So I had some good plays. I had some real terrible recommendations as well, as I joked about in the intro. Whoever whoever mentioned or recommended Adam Shank. Can't say that I did, because I would never do such a thing. But here we are. So hopefully we'll get some momentum built for Houston and then Valero as we work our way very quickly towards the Masters. Good to see you this evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping in chat. It's very much appreciated. The Houston Open. I was on Kitayama. Yeah, I knew you had an outright on Kitayama, and that was one that certainly didn't pan out for you. I was not very high on Kitayama. It kind of made some sense considering the positional nature of Valspar, and he's generally good with his long irons, but he definitely didn't play well. But as we move our attention forward to the Houston Open, Houston used to be played at the Golf Club of Houston for many years. In 2020, it was moved to Memorial Park. And you see, John Bredemus was the original architect of Memorial Park. I'm going to zoom out so we can see the entirety of the fact sheet here. Renovated in 2019 by Tom Doak. And I don't know if it's widespread knowledge or common knowledge that the consultant for the renovation was Brooks Koepka. And their goal was to make a course that was both challenging for professionals, yet able to be played by amateurs and players that come visit the course, because this is a municipal course. It is open to the public down in Houston. So Memorial Park has been seen on the PGA Tour since 2020. With a little bit of a caveat. And that caveat is that the Houston Open used to be played in the fall. When the PGA Tour realigned its schedule with the signature events and such in 2024, Houston got relocated or replaced into the schedule in the early spring. It is my understanding that Houston was always the tune-up or the event prior to the Masters. That's no longer the case. But this will serve as a pretty good test for the Masters. Some other notes regarding the course in general. A new tee was added to hole 16, which has lengthened the course or lengthened that hole by about 30 yards. Ahead of last year's tournament, the 17th green was moved back, adding some, a little bit more yardage. Some weather notes. Public golf course is extremely busy. All that stuff. So the course in of itself is a very long. In fact, thanks to Gabe's note in his article that comes out every Sunday, this is the fourth longest course by par. Not necessarily the fourth longest course in total. We have Kapalua, we have Torrey Pines, but by par, this is the fourth longest course on the tour. This is almost a 7,500 yard par 70. Now, this is a unique par 70 in the sense that there are 5 par 3s, but 3 par 5s. So we have an extra par 3 and an extra par 5 here at Memorial Park. And we get to see that as of right now, it is the third longest course in general. So far this year, of course, Torrey Pines being the longest, Kapalua close to 7,600 yards. But Memorial Park is unique because it is a par 70. So this is a very, very long course that will be played this week. The greens, as we've talked about the past couple weeks, starting with the the players, 2 weeks ago at Sawgrass, and then last week with the Valspar. This is Poa Trivialis Overseed. Same surface as the past 2 weeks. Base Bermuda, but this time of the year, Bermuda's dormant. So we are on Poa Trivialis Overseed again. Very similar to other courses in the South at this time of the year, much like other courses this time of the year. The Bermuda is dormant, so we have this ryegrass overseed. One of the things to keep a note of is this rough is very, very short, only kept at 1.25 inches. So very, very short rough here at Memorial Park. The greens are 7,000 square feet, so pretty large greens in that regard. The fairways are about 30 to 40 yards wide, so even though the total acreage of fairway maybe not all that much, the fairways are pretty generous. Now, this is a little bit deceiving as there's a lot of slope around the course. So much like Augusta, even lies are not very common around Houston. So players will be hitting off hanging lies and downhill lies and whatnot. And players will traverse at least up and down several meters. Gabe has the exact note in his write-up. So the fairways do play a little bit more narrow than what this might suggest, but in general they are pretty wide and fairly forgiving in that regard. Lots of rough because there's only 2 water hazards on the course. Now they do come into play on 4 holes as holes wrap around some ponds or a lake or whatnot. So 4 holes with water in play, and we see the average fairway width there. Very, very few bunkers. Only 21 bunkers on the property at Memorial Park. So the true defense of the course is 1, its length, and 2, it is very difficult to chip and play around the green here. There is not a whole lot of rough around the green. The greens are generally protected by severe sloping, a lot of false fronts. If you imagine just specifically about the U.S. Open last year, Pinehurst number 2, the Don Ross design, where it was almost like a dome shape. Not necessarily to that extreme, but Houston has a lot of those features where if you are on the edge of greens, they will roll off to tightly mown chipping areas, false fronts, etc. So there's a lot of the kind of information, at least GCSAA information, behind Memorial Park. Very, very long par 70. Was recently renovated by Tom Doak with consultation from Brooks Koepka. Greens are large at 7,000 square feet. Poa Trivialis overseed like we've seen the past couple of weeks. Fairways are pretty wide. Maybe not as wide as the fairway widths kind of insinuate, but they are wide. They are fairly forgiving. Only 4 holes with water in play. Very, very few bunkers. There's a look at Memorial Park in a GCSAA standpoint. We'll move now to the players in the field this week for the Houston Open. And I will admit that there have been 2 field changes. I only remember one because I saw his name. Brian Campbell has withdrawn, which has put Aaron Baddeley into the field. And then I will star all these because these are all alternates at the moment. There's been one other field change. I would have to go through it, and I just don't remember. If you want to see the full list of field changes, Rob Bolton over on Twitter. I think his Twitter is @RobBoltonGolf. I think, has the full list of field changes. I know Brian Campbell has withdrawn. There has been a second one. I would have to literally go name by name it's just escaping me off the top of my head. But in the field this week, we have a pretty solid field considering how close we are to the Masters. So I would imagine a lot of these players, this is going to be their Masters tune-up if they didn't play at the Valspar. You see Rory is teeing it up this week. Scotty Scheffler, granted he is a Texas native, so he is generally at this tournament, but Scotty is here. Bridgman, who had a really, really good Valspar, finishing solo third. Nikolai Højgaard, Jason Day, Minwoo Lee, our defending champion, is Stefan Jaeger. Sung Jae is here. So a fairly solid field. Maybe a little bit top heavy, because once you get past maybe the first 5 to 6 names, maybe the quality falls off a little more than you would think. But certainly a fairly solid field for Houston this week. So our top performers in the field this week with no filters, just pure 2025 total performance. Rory, of course, with his 2 wins, coming off the win at the Players. Alex Smalley, JJ Spawn, Scotty, Michael Kim, Aaron Rai, Jacob Bridgman, Taylor Moore, Lee Hodges, and Kevin Roy. I do not think, well, Rory wouldn't have it. Jacob Bridgman would. I did not think that the Valspar was in yet. Doesn't look like it is. So this might, update a little bit come tomorrow. But there's a look, at least in a big picture view, of your top performers so far in 2025. Before we get too much further, we'll definitely be looking at some long course metrics. But let's go ahead and check out the course breakdown in Fantasy National. Get a feel for Memorial Park in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. The length of the course, a lot comes into these long, difficult par 4s. The opening hole, par 4, 522 yards. Second most difficult hole on the course. Plays to a quarter of a shot over par. I mean, Memorial Park comes out and hits you in the mouth. It is very difficult. 490. You have 456, 496. Par 4, 529 yards. Plays to a third of a shot over par. Par 4, 503 yards. So long, difficult par 4s are prevalent around Memorial Park. And even the par 5s are pretty lengthy. 625, 576, 587. So these par 5s aren't gimmies either. You do have, one that plays to a third of a shot, quarter of a shot under par. But you see the par 5 16th barely plays under par. It is no gimme for a birdie. And then, as we talked about, long, difficult par 4s throughout the course. The par 3s are pretty evenly split. You do have a short par 3 at 167. You have one as long as 237, 155. The par 3s are pretty spread out. But long par 4s and long par 5s prevalent here at Memorial Park. You see not a whole lot of eagles. A lot of the challenge of this course is 1, the length, and 2, the greens are quite protected. Maybe not necessarily by sand or water, but some undulation. They play much smaller than 7,000 square feet due to false fronts and severe sightings and all that. So not a whole lot of eagles. 1%, 1%, 1.5 on these par 3s. We'll move down to strokes gained by shot type. At least going back to 2020, it's a lot about putting at Memorial Park. And then it continues to just exacerbate as you move up the leaderboard. Now, we definitely don't want to ignore the approach by any means. But you've seen the top 5, the top 10s, the winners. They are putting very, very well here. like I said, our defending champion is Stefan Jaeger, big hitter, decent putter. Tony Finau is a champion, or at least has played very, very well around Memorial Park. Again, big hitter, not necessarily the best putter. I'd have to cheat. Finau did finish first in 2023. 2022's champion's not here. Who was that? I'd have to cheat and check. But anyway, so big hitters generally perform well here, just due to the mandated length that is needed around Memorial Park. Moving to strokes gained by hole by par, you see the 3 par 5s, the massive importance that they are carrying over the par 3s and the par 4s. Much the same for the par 5s. You will notice that the par 4s lag. There is 2 less par 4s on a standard par 70. We have an extra par 3 and an extra par 5. And then for your winners, you can see that they're generally just not, they're just trying to get their pars on these long, difficult par 4s, finding some birdies on these par 5s, and they will play the par 3s well. So it'll be interesting to see, especially tomorrow in the data dive, just how, or exactly how the strokes gained fall among these categories. Moving to hole composition, as I mentioned, the par 3s are pretty evenly spread out. 2 that are below 175 and then 1 each in the remaining buckets above 175. There are a few short par 4s here, definitely not drivable, but 4 that fall from 400 to 450. But really, the name of the game, you've got 6 par 5s over 450 yards. 3 of those are over 500 yards. Just long, difficult par 4s. And then the par 5s, 2 under 600 yards, 1 over 600 yards at Memorial Park. Approach shot distribution, as you would expect, with so many just long, difficult par 4s. The par 5s can be reachable in 2, maybe not for everybody. 200 plus, the majority of your approach shots come from this range. Now, there are a few shorter par 4s, so you do have a few short irons or maybe even wedges in your hand in the approach shots on these shorter par 4s. But really, 200 plus, at least in terms of purely by the amount of shots taken from that range, 200 plus. So we'll have to see tomorrow in the data dive if that really does contribute to high leaderboard success. Historic cut line, I'm really not terribly concerned with these first 3 years. Again, these first 3 years were played in the fall. So the Memorial Park, it says 2021. This was actually the fall of 2020. This was the tournament before the Fall Masters. 2022 in the fall, 2023 in the fall, but fall of that season. So fall of 2020, fall of 2021, fall of 2022. Memorial Park was not seen at all in the calendar year of 2023, and then made its return to the PGA Tour schedule at this time last year with the update to the PGA Tour schedule. So played last year in the spring of 2024. So you see last year was a +2. It's been as high as +4. This is a difficult course. It's just a difficult course. We see that with the scoring distribution. There are roughly the same amount of birdies and bogeys. You can get a few birdies around here. Winning scores have been, into the teens at Memorial Park, but it's not a whole lot. Much like the Valspar last week, you saw maybe some scores creeping into the double digits, but most of the time players were struggling to get to 7, 8 under. That is generally the case around Houston as well, because you see a few doubles here and the Eagles are non-existent. Driving accuracy, much less than the average tour event. Again, a little bit misleading. Players aren't scared to be in the rough. The rough is not long here, and it's not difficult to play out of. If this was pure Bermuda rough, it would be much more difficult to play out of, but since it is overseeded due to the time of the year, the rough isn't really an issue. Players know that they have to have a lot of length, so driver is in most of these players' hands. So driving accuracy suffers because of that. Green in regulation percentage is much lower here. Again, the combination of false fronts and severe sightings, along with the fact that most players are coming in with very long irons into these greens, also promotes a low green in regulation percentage. And scrambling is a little bit more difficult than the average tour event. Very tight lies, difficult chipping, and around the green play around Memorial Park. However, 3 putts per round, not necessarily a big deal. You see a little bit less than the average tour event. Distance, as we talked about, driver is in these players' hands quite a bit. So distance is quite a bit higher here than the average tour event. Proximity is a little bit further away. There's a look at Memorial Park in terms of a scorecard and graphical view. Before we go back to the players' page view, let's take a look very quickly at the historic conditions. You see last year played difficult. We had some wind pickup early on in the tournament last year, and of course we'll check weather starting tomorrow. But 2 rounds difficult, 2 rounds of average. But what you won't see, except for this final round in 2021, is easy. I mean, there's just not very many easy rounds. The majority of these rounds are difficult. Now the green speeds, however, are kept pretty average in terms of speed. They will get sped up maybe a little bit, but we're looking at average to fast. These are not lightning fast greens. Hey, good evening, Rose. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you had a good Valspar. I'm trying to think of some of the players that you had mentioned. I know one of them came through. One of them definitely didn't. So I know you threw out a few names last week. Hopefully you had a good Valspar and you're ready for the Houston Open. But yeah, I wanted to just emphasize the difficulty here and then these green speeds. Interestingly enough, even though the GCSA tournament fact sheet says 7,475 yards, I want you to take a note here that under course length, at least per Fantasy National, the official yardage round by round has not been over 7,400 yards. So I find that quite interesting that the official scorecard would clearly be in the over 7,400, but it just goes to show that there is a lot of maneuverability, I guess, is the way to say that, with tournament setup. They move tees and pins around, that it hasn't played over 7,400 yards in any round since we've seen Memorial Park. So very interesting. I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward. Did good. 5 of your 6 made the cut. I did have one 6-6 lineup. It was, or wait, did I? I thought I had one 6-6, but it was pretty poor performing. It was guys that just made the cut on the number, etc. I didn't play any Victor Hovland. Corey Connors kind of tried to make a run, and then his front 9 was bad today. So my Valspar was pretty middling. Not a disaster by any means like the players. The players, it was a disaster. Valspar wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Think about Heavy Hughes and Rye for this week. You had 166, but Adam Scott imploded. Yeah, Adam Scott at least made the cut, and then decided to forget how to play golf, or something happened, because I saw that he was DFL yesterday in his Saturday round, and then I don't know what he did today, but I know he wasn't, charging the leaderboard or anything. But good to hear that you had a decent week, Rose. Glad to hear it. So let's move back to the players in the field this week for the Houston Open. And again, if you happen to see the second player that has withdrawn, I know Brian Campbell has. If you see the second player, let me know to make sure I don't, or I star them. That way we know. Did good for me not to put that much work in. Well, there you go. It's always good to get rewarded for the amount of work you put in. Obviously, the more work you put in, you want to get more in return. And I commend you for being level-headed and realizing that you might not put in as much work as others, and that way you don't have extremely high expectations. So good for you on that. And again, glad to hear that you had a successful week. Let's start breaking down this field just a little bit. We're going to first look at difficult. Even with the course length maybe a little bit in question, since at least by Fantasy National they have never played it at 7,400 yards. What is not in question is how difficult Memorial Park is. Working overtime this week. There you go. Nothing wrong with that unless it's mandatory and you don't want to. But I definitely did some overtime last week, trying to do a lot of the same amount of preparation for the Valspar while doing some March Madness stuff as well. When rounds have been difficult relative to par, going back to the beginning of last year, our top performers in the field this week: Scotty Scheffler, Rory, Ryan Fox, Andrew Novak, Mackenzie Hughes. To your point, Phil, Mackenzie Hughes. Interesting. Let's check Mackenzie Hughes. Let's see how he has done just very, very quickly here at Memorial Park. So he did finish top 15 last year, and then a top 20, a top 30, and a top 10. So Mackenzie Hughes has had lots of success here at Memorial Park. So very good shout there, Phil. You can see Mackenzie Hughes doing some Mackenzie Hughes things. He's always a very, very good around the green player. His putting has been very good. I'll try to swivel out of the way, let you all see his putting details there, at least for Memorial Park. Do not look at 2019's. This was played at the Golf Club of Houston. So you're only wanting to look at these 4 years. But good shot there, Phil. Mackenzie Hughes has had a lot of success here. Mackenzie Hughes, Siwoo Kim, Danny Walker, Aaron Rai, Davis Riley, and Tristan Lawrence are your top 10 in terms of total performance when rounds have been difficult relative to par in the past 14 months. Trying to place in the green for all the year. I mean, that's the goal, and that's what we're all trying to strive for. That's why I use that phrase in the outro every time, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Some weeks are better than others. I know the Players was a pretty much a disaster for yours truly that week, and then Valspar was middling. So hopefully we're building some momentum. We're getting on the right track there. I will go ahead and take a look at over 7,400. I'm not as confident in this filter, just due to the fact of Fantasy National seeming to conflict with at least the total raw yardage that the GCSAA tournament fact sheet lists. But on long courses, your top performers in the past 14 or so months: Rory, Scotty, Taylor Pendrith, Thomas Dietrich, Sungjae, Justin Lauer, Hayden Springer, Sam Stevens, Keith Mitchell, and Maddie Schmid are your top 10 in that regard. Any player that is starred other than Brian Campbell has withdrawn from playing this week. Any other player that is starred, like Kevin Tway, is an alternate at the moment. Just an FYI for you, the viewer. Just because you mentioned him and I saw him at the bottom of the screen there, let's take a look at Aaron Rai. You mentioned him, Phil. Let's see how he has done at Memorial Park. Again, seemingly a pretty good shout. 2 top 10s and a top 20. So Aaron Rai, someone who is very, very proficient with long irons. The putter is kind of hot and cold, but he has putt very well around Memorial Park. So 2 very good shouts in terms of previous history or course history, Phil, in that regard. Okay, let's take a look at we'll take a look at proximity 200 plus just kind of quickly. We'll take a look at proximity 200 plus in this calendar year. Whoops, wrong column. Your top 200 plus Prox approach players in the field this week: EVR, Eric Van Rooyen, Joel Damon, Charlie Hoffman, Mark Hubbard, Danny Walker, Adam Schenk, Rasmus Højgaard, Max Grazerman, Chris Ventura, and Nicholas Norgard. Those are your top 10 in terms of 200 plus Prox. And again, we'll see tomorrow just how much that contributes to high leaderboard success. But for an initial research take or our initial look to get the wheels turning, if you will, I don't think it's a bad idea to think about 200 plus 200 plus approaches, if I could talk. The only other thing I think I want to look at, I looked at long and difficult, but we didn't go through the actual strokes gained. So my apologies. I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I want to make sure we hit this. So your top approach players in the field this week: JJ Spawn, Scotty, Henrik Norlander, Nick Taylor, Doug Gim, Jackson Suber, Joel Damon, Nikolai Højgaard, Jake Knapp, and Michael Kim. Again, this will change come tomorrow because the Valspar is not in yet. We just have the players. So this will change come tomorrow. And this obviously will change come tomorrow because the Valspar also had Poa Trivialis. But let's take a look at some Poa Trivialis putting real quick, just like we've done for the past couple of weeks. So we're going to use those same courses: Harbor Town, Innisbrook, where we just came from, Memorial Park. We'll take a look at Quail Hollow, Stadium Course, TPC San Antonio, Sawgrass, and Scottsdale. These are the courses that are listed as having Poa Trivialis Overseed for their greens. So on Poa Trivialis Overseed, I'm going back to 2023 just to give players enough rounds to make it statistically significant. Your top putters: Sam Ryder, who I've been pretty high on for the past couple of weeks. I'm not sure this is the best fit for Ryder, although I didn't get much right for the players. I was a little bit better for the Valspar. Sam Ryder has been pretty integral to whatever success that I've had, considering he's been cheap and he's been very, very unique the past couple of weeks. But again, conceptually, this did not feel like a good Sam Ryder course. He has not had much success here. So probably off the Sam Ryder train now. I'll enjoy the 2 weeks that he played well for me. But Sam Ryder, your top putter on Poa Trivialis: Thomas Dietrich, Taylor Montgomery, Jason Day, Chad Ramey, Ben Griffin, Matt McNeely, Wyndham Clark, Mackenzie Hughes again, Phil, and Nick Taylor. There's your top 10 in terms of putters on Poa Trivialis. Okay, now we'll jump to par 4 scoring. We definitely want to take a look at these longer par 4s. So we're going to focus on these 2 ranges mostly. I am going to sort on all par 4s, but we're mainly wanting to look at these 2. So somebody like Scotty, Alex Smalley, Aaron Rai, 3rd and 9th. Very good. Sorry, I keep highlighting these 2. I'm meaning these 2. 450 to 5 and 500 plus. My apologies. We're wanting to look at the long 2 So let's try that again. Alex Smalley still first and 43rd. Scotty third and 34th. Rye not as good on the extremely long par fives. Someone who is JJ Spawn, 5th and 6th. Very solid. Definitely Rory. Michael Kim has been very good at these extremely long par fours. Sam Stevens, top 10 and top 20. Thomas Dietrich, top 10 and top 20 on these long par fours. Let's see, anyone else who jumps off the page? Maybe Jacob Bridgman. Honorable mention there, perhaps. Look at someone like Nick Taylor, who's going to be first in the 450 to 5, but really has struggled in the 500 plus. Granted, there isn't a whole lot of data for the 500 plus. If we click on his rounds, this might be just the Century. So there was a couple at the Genesis, at Torrey. You had, I would imagine, the Waste Management. This was, so they played one 500 plus that week, the Century. So there isn't a whole lot of data for just 2025. That's why I like to incorporate 2024 in my mixed condition model, because not every course has 500 plus par fours and drivable par fours, etc. Just giving you an explanation on why I use different time frames for some of my metrics. Let's see. Chris Ventura might be interesting to think about early on this week, at least in terms of the long par fours. 11th and 35th. It's not bad. All right. Well, let's move to the strokes gained total or tournament history page view. The players who have played the best around Memorial Park. Now, we're going to be only looking at these 4 years. 2020, when it says 2020, that should have been the last year it was at the Golf Club of Houston. So be mindful of that. Even though this says 2021, again, this was played in the fall of the year 2020. It was just the 2021 season. We had the wraparound PGA Tour schedule still back then. So keep that in mind. I will continue to emphasize that all week. We're only going to be looking at these 4 years. But you see, Scotty has played exceptionally well around here. A couple of runner-ups, another top 10. Tony Finau has been exceptional here. Win in 2023, or fall of 2022. Runner-up last year. Did miss one cut. Also another top 25. Again, like you mentioned, Phil, Mackenzie Hughes, and Aaron Rye, 3rd and 4th in terms of strokes gained total here at Memorial Park. Matt McNeely has been fairly solid here. 2 top 20s and a top 30. Jaeger has been solid. Defending champion, top 10 before that. Davis Riley has been good here. Joel Damon missed the cut last year, but has a top 5 and a top 10. Jason Day, Wyndham Clark, top 20, and then starts to get pretty middling. Smalley's been pretty darn good. Top 5, top 15 in the missed cut. Couple of one-time runner-ups, so we don't want to put a whole lot of weight into that, but clearly, at least for 1 week and 1 year, they played this course very well. Siwoo, been decent here. As we scroll down, Molinari, okay. Taylor Moore was 0 for 2 and then runner-up last year. Interesting. So here's a look at some of the players who have excelled at Memorial Park. Players who have not been good at Memorial Park. Jimmy Walker 0 for 4. Carson Young 0 for 2. Trying to get some more, maybe bigger names. Henrik Norlander. Well known for his iron play, but the putter can escape him. And we saw in the breakdown just how much putting has been big at Memorial Park. So, pretty explanatory there. Henrik Norlander has struggled. Pendrith, despite being one of the better players on long courses, he's kind of struggled here. He was acceptable last year, but first 2 times were forgettable. Matt Wallace, I know somebody that you mentioned last week, Rose. 0 for 2 here. Bo Hostler, very good putter, but has not had a lot of success at Memorial Park. 1 for 3. Sam Ryder, again, talked about him just a little bit. This didn't feel like a good Sam Ryder fit, so probably off the Sam Ryder recommendations for this week. Michael Kim has struggled here. He has made the cut twice to 2 forgettable performances and then missed the cut in the first one. Bo Hostler, I mean, you would want to think he would be okay just because he's a really good putter and this place really promotes putting. But, like, his struggles are pretty clear. And one of the main reasons, or the biggest reason I was off Sam Burns last week, like, the irons have just been really bad. And Bo Hostler is not good enough of a putter. He's a really good putter, but he's not all-world enough to make up for this bad of iron play. You know, if he was more like he was at the Waste Management, like negative 0.3, maybe even -1, he might be able to stomach it or salvage it because he is generally a pretty good putter. But even that's been hot and cold so far in 2025. So at least early on this week, Rose, I think I'm with you in that regard. Specifically on Bo. You want to like the putter, but he's been fairly forgettable. So anyway, that's what I have for you in terms of an initial research. I went ahead and made an early look file. We might look at it tomorrow, but I am honestly kind of torn on what to do, and it all has to do with the time on the schedule that Memorial Park has been seen. Again, remember, for these 3 years here, this was played in the fall. And, it's the same golf course, but it doesn't necessarily play the exact same. The Bermuda isn't dormant then. So the greens are different. The rough is different. I'd be interested to hear your all's take. Maybe take some time tomorrow and think about it, or put it in the comments. What do you think? Do you think the course is similar enough that we should include, all the way back to essentially the fall of 2020? Or should we just kind of focus on last year, even though it's a much smaller sample size of data, because at least it's consistent, being this time of the year? So I'm kind of going back and forth with myself on that. I'll reach out to Gabe tomorrow as well and see what he thinks. But I did make an early look file. Not going to show that tonight. I might look at it tomorrow, or I might show it tomorrow if I think about how I want to approach this week a little bit more. But that's what I have for you all in terms of an initial research show. Thanks to Phil and Rose for jumping into chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Again, hopefully your Valspar was good. You had the Victor Hovland outright. You played all the Victor Hovland and the Justin Thomas. And trying to build some momentum as we inch closer to the Masters. So thanks again for all the support, for all the wagers you made this past week for the Valspar Championship, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the Valspar Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.